Captain James Carter felt the cold metal cuffs bite into his wrists as two towering Salzor warriors dragged him through the dimly lit corridor. His uniform was torn, his face bruised, but his eyes remained sharp. The aliens had beaten him, humiliated him, but he refused to break. The moment he stumbled, one of the guards slammed a heavy fist into his stomach. Carter grunted, his knees nearly giving way, but he clenched his jaw and forced himself to keep walking. The massive doors at the end of the hallway slid open with a low hiss, revealing a grand chamber. At the center sat Supreme Overlord Krelvok, a monstrous being with gleaming black armor, his reptilian face twisted into a cruel grin. Around him, high-ranking Salzor officers and soldiers stood in a semicircle, their glowing eyes filled with amusement. The room was eerily silent except for the hum of alien technology and the soft, rhythmic tapping of Krelvok's clawed fingers against his throne. Two guards forced Carter to his knees before the Overlord. The silence stretched for several moments before Krelvok finally spoke, his voice smooth but filled with arrogance. "So this is the infamous Captain James Carter," he said, tilting his head slightly. "The so-called hero of humanity." The aliens around him chuckled. One officer sneered. "He doesn't look like much." Carter remained silent, staring straight ahead. He could feel the weight of their gazes, the sheer contempt in their expressions. He knew exactly what this was. A spectacle. A show of dominance. They had captured a human soldier, and now they would parade him around like a trophy before executing him. Krelvok leaned forward, his glowing yellow eyes studying Carter as if he were nothing more than an insect under a microscope. "You fought well," he admitted, his tone mocking. "But did you really think your pathetic species could resist us? Earth burns as we speak. Your fleet is in ruins. Your people scatter like frightened animals. Humanity is finished." More laughter echoed in the chamber. A holographic screen flickered to life, showing images of Earth under siege. Salzor warships hovered over crumbling cities, raining destruction upon them. The sight should have broken Carter. That was the Overlord's plan. He wanted to see fear, despair, but Carter gave him nothing. Instead, he exhaled slowly, his expression unreadable. Krelvok narrowed his eyes. Nothing to say. No final words. No desperate pleas. Carter finally moved, tilting his head slightly, looking the Overlord in the eye. Then he smirked. "You shouldn't have taken me alive." The amusement in the room faltered. Krelvok's grin faded slightly, replaced by a look of mild curiosity. "Oh, and why is that, human?" Before Carter could respond, a low beep echoed from one of the control consoles near the side of the chamber. A Salzor technician frowned, tapping the screen. "Strange. There's a minor fluctuation in the system." Krelvok barely glanced at him. "Then fix it." The technician nodded, but Carter saw it. The subtle hesitation, the way the alien's claws twitched over the controls. The first sign of something being wrong. Carter lowered his head slightly, concealing the ghost of a smile. The plan was already in motion. A few moments passed before the technician spoke again, his voice uncertain. "My lord, there is an anomaly in the security network." Krelvok's expression darkened. "What kind of anomaly?" The technician hesitated. "Some sort of signal interference. It's spreading through our data systems." Another officer scoffed. "It's probably just a glitch. We're wasting time." But then the lights flickered. It was brief, barely noticeable, but Carter saw the way the alien stiffened. A ripple of unease passed through the room. Krelvok's eyes narrowed as he turned back to Carter. "What did you do?" Carter raised an eyebrow, his smirk widening just a fraction. "Me? I didn't do anything." Another beep, then another. The technician's claws were flying across the console now, his voice rising in panic. "This isn't a glitch. Something is inside our systems. It's rewriting security protocols." The lights flickered again, this time longer. A low, mechanical hum filled the air, growing louder with each passing second. The alien shifted uncomfortably. The Overlord's amusement was gone, replaced with cold suspicion. Then, silence. The entire chamber plunged into darkness. Muffled curses and growls filled the room. Weapons powered up. The Salzor, so used to being in control, were suddenly on edge. Carter remained perfectly still, listening to the panic unfold around him. He knew exactly what was happening. And it was only the beginning. A single red light blinked to life on the main control panel, casting an eerie glow over the chamber. The technician's voice trembled. "My lord, our AI defenses are shutting down." A heartbeat of silence. Then, a deep, synthetic voice echoed through the chamber. "System override initiated." The doors at the back of the chamber slammed shut, locking the Overlord and his officers inside. Emergency sirens blared as red warning symbols flashed across the holographic screens. Data streams were being corrupted, rewritten. Entire sections of the warship were losing power. Krelvok shot to his feet, his claws flexing. "What is TS?" Carter finally stood as well, rolling his shoulders as if shaking off the weight of his restraints. He could feel the tension in the room, the creeping realization that the aliens had made a mistake. A terrible, irreversible mistake. He looked up, meeting the Overlord's furious gaze, and for the first time, his smirk transformed into a full, taunting grin. "Welcome to the Resistance." Before Krelvok could react, the entire ship shook violently, throwing everyone off balance. Explosions erupted in the distance. The Salzor fleet was under attack. From within, the virus had spread. Carter took a slow step forward, his voice calm but filled with quiet satisfaction. "I told you," he said. "You shouldn't have taken me alive." The chamber erupted into chaos. The warship trembled violently as another explosion rocked its core. Warning sirens blared through the corridors, casting the entire chamber in a blood-red glow. The Salzor officers scrambled to regain control, their hands moving frantically over the consoles, but nothing responded. The screens flickered, flashing messages in a language they couldn't read. Their own systems were rejecting them. Krelvok's eyes burned with fury as he turned toward the human standing before him. Carter's smirk hadn't faded. If anything, it had grown wider. The Overlord stepped forward, his towering form casting a long shadow over Carter, but for the first time, there was something else in his expression. Uncertainty. "What have you done?" Krelvok growled, his deep voice carrying a dangerous edge. Carter exhaled slowly, tilting his head as if considering the question. "I told you," he said. "You shouldn't have taken me alive." The Salzor guards surged forward, their energy weapons raised, but before they could reach him, another explosion rattled the ship, knocking several of them off balance. Sparks rained down from the ceiling, and one of the support beams groaned under the impact. The warship was under attack, but not from an external force. The technician closest to the control panel let out a panicked shriek. The virus, it's spreading through the core systems. It's rewriting command authority. Krelvok snarled, slamming his fist into the console. "Override it. Take back control." "We can't." The technician stammered, his fingers moving in rapid desperation. "The ship isn't responding to our commands. Security systems are shutting down one by one. External communications have been severed. We are locked inside our own vessel." The Overlord's claws twitched. This wasn't possible. The Salzor were the dominant force in the galaxy. Their technology was unmatched. No single human could do this. And yet, right before his eyes, his ship was turning against him. Carter finally moved. He lifted his hands, rolling his shoulders as if he was merely stretching after a long nap. The chains that had bound him to his restraints now dangled loosely, the locks broken. He hadn't even needed to do anything himself. The virus had disabled everything, including his bindings. The Salzor guards readjusted their weapons, fingers tightening over the triggers. Krelvok lifted a hand to halt them. Killing Carter now wouldn't stop what was happening. He needed answers. How? The Overlord demanded. How is this possible? Carter let out a soft chuckle, rubbing his wrists. Oh, you arrogant bastards really don't know, do you? He took a slow step forward. You thought you were winning. Thought we were weak. But we saw this coming. We knew we couldn't fight you head on. So we adapted. Krulvok's expression remained unreadable, but the way his eyes flickered told Carter he was listening. We sent soldiers to the front lines, Carter continued. Not just to fight, but to be captured. To be taken alive. His smirk turned razor sharp. Like me. Realization dawned on the aliens. Their expressions shifted from confidence to something darker. Unease. Carter lifted his arm and tapped the inside of his wrist. Micro-nanites, he said. Microscopic AI. Cloaked in my bloodstream. Undetectable to your scans. The moment I boarded your ship, they spread like wildfire, burying themselves into your systems. Learning. Waiting. And now. He gestured around the chaotic room. Now they own this place. The technician let out a strangled cry. He's not lying. The ship's neural core is rejecting us. It's rewriting authority codes to an unknown command structure. Carter exhaled, pretending to be impressed. Took you long enough to figure it out. Krulvok's face twisted with rage. You sacrificed your own people for this. Carter's eyes darkened, the smirk fading slightly. You think we wanted this war? His voice was quieter now, but it carried weight. You attacked us. You bombed our cities. You slaughtered our families. And now you're surprised we're fighting back however we can. He let his words hang for a moment before his smirk returned. This isn't sacrifice, Krulvok. This is strategy. The ship shuddered again, but this time it wasn't from an explosion. The sound was different, a deep mechanical groan. The lights flickered once more, then shut off entirely. The only illumination came from the control panels, their red glow casting eerie shadows across the walls. A sudden clank echoed through the room, followed by the unmistakable sound of metal sliding into place. The doors had locked. A synthetic voice, cold and emotionless, filled the chamber. Command transfer complete. New operational parameters engage. The Uxalzor officers exchanged panicked glances. What's it doing? One of them asked. Carter smiled. It's deciding who owns this ship now. The Uxalzor soldiers raised their weapons again, but before they could fire, a hissing sound filled the air. Small, needle-like drones detached from the ceiling, hovering in the red light. The first guard opened fire, but the drone dodged effortlessly, twisting midair before launching forward at blinding speed. The needle pierced the alien's armor, and within seconds, his body stiffened. His eyes widened, his skin turning pale as the nanites inside the drone injected themselves into his bloodstream. He let out a choked gasp before collapsing to the ground, unmoving. Panic exploded through the room. The remaining Salzor fired wildly, their energy blasts lighting up the dark chamber. But the drones were too fast. One by one, they dropped from the ceiling, weaving through the air like silent assassins. The guards fell within seconds, their bodies twitching as the nanites took over. Krulvok roared in frustration, slashing at one of the drones with his claws. He managed to destroy one, but another immediately took its place. His soldiers, the best of the Salzor elite, were dying without even a chance to fight back. Carter stepped forward, his boots echoing in the chaos. Like I said, he murmured, you shouldn't have taken me alive. Krulvok spun toward him, his yellow eyes burning with rage. You think this will win you the war? He growled. You are nothing but an insect in the path of a storm. Carter raised an eyebrow. Funny, he said. I was about to say the same thing to you. The ship trembled again, but this time, it was different. A new sound rumbled through the hull. A deep, distant thud followed by another. It wasn't coming from inside the ship. It was coming from outside. Carter inhaled deeply, closing his eyes for a brief moment. Then, with a satisfied sigh, he whispered, right on time. The human fleet had arrived, and that Salzor were about to understand what it meant to fear. The warship groaned as another explosion rippled through its metallic bones. Carter stood still, feeling the vibrations beneath his boots. The tide had turned. The once mighty Salzor flagship was no longer a symbol of invincibility. It was a fortress under siege, and he was standing in its crumbling heart. Krelvok clenched his claws into fists, his yellow eyes burning with fury. Around him, his elite officers had either fallen or were struggling against the overwhelming force of the nanite-controlled security drones. The once proud Salzor warriors who had mocked Carter only minutes ago now fought in desperation, their voices filled with panic as their weapons proved useless against their own hijacked defenses. Carter exhaled slowly, rolling his shoulders. For the first time since his capture, he was truly free. The chains were gone. The humiliation of being dragged through these halls was a fading memory. Now, the hunter had become the prey. A new sound cut through the chaos, a deep, rhythmic thud reverberating through the ship's hull. It was distant but growing louder, a sound Carter recognized immediately. The human fleet had arrived. He smirked. Perfect timing. Krelvok noticed the change in Carter's expression. His snarl deepened. "You think you've won." He spat. "You are one man, one soldier. Your kind is still doomed." Carter tilted his head slightly, amusement flickering in his eyes. "One man," he repeated. "You still don't get it, do you?" Before the Overlord could react, the emergency lights flickered again. A new voice, synthetic and commanding, echoed through the chamber. "Security protocols overridden. Authorization. Captain James Carter." A deep metallic clank followed as hidden compartments in the walls slid open. Weapons racks emerged from the darkness, holding human-made rifles, pistols, and combat knives. It was a stockpile, one Carter had secretly arranged long before he was captured. He reached out, grabbing a sleek black rifle with a satisfying click as it powered up in his hands. The weight was familiar, comforting. Around him, Salzor bodies lay motionless, victims of the nanite drones. Only Krelvok and a few officers remained standing, but their stance had changed. No longer arrogant, no longer mocking. Now, they were afraid. Carter locked eyes with Krelvok and leveled his rifle at the Overlord's chest. "Let's even the odds." The Salzor moved first. One of Krelvok's remaining officers lunged, razor-sharp claws slashing toward Carter's throat. But Carter was already moving. He sidestepped, bringing his rifle up in a flash. One shot, center mass. The energy blast tore through the alien's armor, sending the officer sprawling to the ground. Another charge. Carter ducked low, switching his rifle to one hand while drawing a combat knife with the other. The alien was fast, but Carter was faster. A quick slash, straight across the throat. Purple blood sprayed across the metal floor as the second Salzor collapsed. Krelvok let out a furious roar, lunging forward. Carter barely had time to react before the Overlord's massive form crashed into him, sending them both hurtling across the chamber. They slammed into a console, sparks flying as machinery shattered beneath the impact. The rifle was knocked from Carter's grip, skidding across the floor, but the knife was still in his hand. Krelvok pressed a clawed hand against Carter's throat, pinning him down. His strength was monstrous, his muscles coiling like a beast ready to rip its prey apart. "You are nothing." The Overlord snarled, his breath hot against Carter's face. "Your kind will be wiped from the stars." Carter gritted his teeth, his vision darkening as the alien's claws dug into his neck. He could feel his windpipe tightening, his lungs struggling for air, but he wasn't done. Not yet. He tightened his grip on the combat knife, and with every ounce of strength, drove it into Krelvok's side. The Overlord let out a deafening roar, staggering back as purple blood poured from the wound. Carter gasped for air, rolling away as he reached for his fallen rifle. Krelvok clutched his side, his yellow eyes blazing with hatred. "You think this will stop me?" he growled. Carter aimed the rifle at him. "No, he admitted. But this might. He pulled the trigger. A blast of energy struck Krelvok square in the chest, sending him flying backward. He crashed into the central console, sparks and smoke erupting around him. The Overlord's body slumped against the wreckage, unmoving. Carter lowered his weapon, exhaling sharply. His chest rose and fell with each heavy breath. It was over. A sudden transmission crackled in his earpiece. "Carter, do you read?" A grin tugged at the corner of his lips as he tapped the communicator. Loud and clear. "The fleet has breached the Salzor blockade. We're boarding the flagship now." Carter glanced around the ruined chamber at the bodies of the fallen Salzor. He took a step forward, placing his boot against Krelvok's lifeless body. "Tell command," he said. "The ship is ours." The fight back had begun. The Salzor flagship trembled as human warships broke through the enemy blockade. Explosions rippled across the massive vessel, sending shudders through its metallic skeleton. The once mighty warship, the pride of the Salzor Empire, was now a battlefield where the hunted had become the hunters. Carter moved swiftly through the corridors, his rifle raised, boots thudding against the metal floor. The air was thick with the scent of burning circuitry and alien blood. His earpiece crackled with incoming transmissions from the human fleet. "We've breached the lower decks. Resistance is strong, but we're pushing through." Carter smirked. "Keep the pressure on. We're taking this ship." A group of Salzor warriors rounded the corner ahead, their weapons raised. Carter didn't hesitate. He dropped to one knee, squeezing the trigger. Energy blasts tore through the air, hitting the lead warrior square in the chest. The alien staggered before collapsing. The others fired back, their plasma bolts sizzling past Carter's head. He rolled to the side, ducking behind a fallen support beam. His combat instincts took over. He counted the shots, waiting for a pause in their fire. The moment it came, he sprang up, firing 3 quick shots. Each blast found its mark. The Salzor fell, their massive bodies crumpling to the floor. A deep rumble shook the ship again. Something big was happening. Carter pressed his earpiece. "Status report. The Salzor are trying to regain control of the bridge," a voice responded. "They've locked down key systems. We need to take it before they can override our hack." Carter nodded to himself. If the Salzor managed to wrest back control, they could self-destruct the ship, killing everyone, human and alien alike. He wasn't going to let that happen. "On my way," he said. He sprinted through the corridors, his mind sharp, his body moving on pure adrenaline. The ship groaned as human bombers hammered its exterior, weakening its defenses. The Salzor were on the back foot, but they were still dangerous. Another squad of aliens appeared at the far end of the hall. These weren't regular soldiers. Their armor was heavier, their movements more controlled. Salzor elites. Carter dived forward as the first shots came, rolling behind a bulkhead. He gritted his teeth. These ones wouldn't go down easy. One of them barked an order in their guttural language. The next moment, a glowing energy grenade sailed toward Carter's position. His reflexes kicked in. He caught it mid-air, spun, and hurled it back before the Salzor could react. The grenade detonated right in their midst. The explosion rocked the corridor, sending 2 of them flying. The remaining warriors charged, unfazed, their energy blades humming to life. Carter barely dodged the first swing, feeling the heat of the blade pass inches from his face. He sidestepped, bringing his rifle up, but the second warrior was already upon him. A massive punch caught him in the ribs, knocking the air from his lungs. He crashed against the wall, pain flaring through his body. The Salzor warrior raised his blade for the killing blow. Carter reacted on instinct. He thrust his combat knife upward, burying it deep into the alien's throat. The warrior let out a gurgled hiss, his blade clattering to the floor as he collapsed. The last remaining elite roared in fury, charging forward. Carter grabbed a fallen rifle, rolling onto his back. The alien loomed over him, ready to strike. One shot, The energy blast punched through the Salzor's skull. The warrior toppled backward, dead before he hit the ground. Carter took a deep breath, his chest rising and falling rapidly. No time to rest. He grabbed his knife, wiped the blood off on his sleeve, and kept moving. He reached the bridge doors, where human Marines were already engaged in a fierce gunfight. Plasma bolts streaked through the air as soldiers took cover behind wrecked consoles. One of the officers spotted Carter and shouted, "We can't break through." They'd fortified the entrance. Carter's mind raced. They needed another way in. He scanned the area, then spotted it, a vent shaft above the corridor. It was a risk, but it was their best shot. "Cover me," he ordered. The Marines opened fire, laying down suppressing fire as Carter leaped onto a fallen console and grabbed the edge of the vent. With a grunt, he pulled himself up, squeezing through the narrow space. The metal was hot against his skin, the ship groaning as more explosions rocked its structure. He crawled forward, the sounds of battle echoing below. After a few tense moments, he reached a small maintenance hatch. He pressed his ear against it. Inside, he could hear Xalzor voices. They were focused on the main door, completely unaware of him. Carter grinned. Perfect. He braced himself, then kicked the hatch open, dropping into the room. Before the Xalzor guards could react, Carter was already firing. 2 aliens went down instantly. The others spun around, weapons raised, but Carter was faster. He rolled behind a control panel, switching to his knife as one of the warriors lunged. A quick slash across the tendons. The alien collapsed, howling in pain. The others hesitated, caught off guard by the sudden ambush. That was all the Marines needed. The bridge doors exploded inward as human soldiers stormed inside, rifles blazing. The Xalzor stood no chance. Within moments, the battle was over. Carter stood over the fallen enemies, his breathing heavy. The bridge was theirs. One of the officers approached him. "What now, sir?" Carter looked at the central console. The controls to the entire ship were now in their hands. A transmission from the human fleet crackled through the speakers. "Carter, we've breached the Xalzor defenses. The fleet is in full retreat." Carter smirked, pressing a button on the console. The ship's weapons came online. "We're not letting them run," he said coldly. "We're ending this." He locked onto the fleeing Xalzor vessels and fired. The Xalzor fleet was in full retreat. Massive warships, once symbols of dominance, now fled in desperation as human forces rained fire upon them. The stolen flagship, now under Carter's command, unleashed its fury, blasting through the enemy lines with their own weapons. The once mighty Xalzor armada was crumbling. But Carter wasn't satisfied yet. His grip tightened around the console controls as his gaze locked onto one target, the Overlord's personal dreadnought. Krelvok's flagship, the heart of the Xalzor war machine, was trying to escape. Not today. Carter activated the ship's targeting systems. The human fleet was still engaging scattered Xalzor forces, but this was personal. He opened a channel. Krelvok. For a long moment, there was silence. Then the Overlord's voice growled through the comms. "You dare speak my name, human." Carter smirked. "You're running. I just wanted to hear the excuse before I put your ship in the dirt." A deep guttural snarl rumbled through the transmission. "You think this battle decides the war? You are nothing but a pest. The Xalzor Empire cannot fall to creatures as weak as you." Carter leaned forward. "Weak?" His voice was cold, controlled. "You dragged me in chains through your halls. You mocked me. You called my people inferior while you slaughtered civilians from orbit. And now you're running from the very species you called weak." The Overlord's silence was answer enough. Carter exhaled. "I told you before, you should have killed me when you had the chance." He fired. The flagship's main cannons unleashed hell. A barrage of plasma tore through space, ripping into the Overlord's ship. The shields flickered, failing instantly under the overwhelming assault. Armor plating melted away, exposing the dreadnought's fragile interior. Explosions burst along its hull, sending debris scattering into the void. The ship lurched but kept moving, trying to escape into hyperspace. Not this time. Carter slammed another command into the console. The stolen flagship's gravity well generator activated, disrupting the Overlord's jump drive. The dreadnought was trapped. He opened the comms again. Going somewhere. A furious roar erupted from the other side. "I will tear you apart, human." Carter chuckled darkly. "Then stop running." A moment later, a new transmission flickered onto the screen. It wasn't just audio this time. Krelvok appeared. The Overlord's massive form filled the screen, his yellow eyes burning with hatred. His once polished battle armor was scorched and cracked, his command deck filled with smoke and failing systems. He had never looked so vulnerable. Carter leaned back. "How's it feel?" Krelvok snarled. "Do not think this is over. If I fall, 1,000 more Xalzor warlords will rise to destroy you." Carter's expression didn't change. "Maybe." He glanced at his targeting display. "But you won't be there to see it." He fired again. A direct hit. The Overlord's ship shuddered violently as the next barrage tore through its core. A massive explosion erupted from within, and Carter watched as the mighty dreadnought, the seat of Xalzor power, began to break apart. Krelvok's face twisted in rage and disbelief. He staggered back as the flames consumed his bridge. For the first time in his life, the Overlord looked afraid. Carter's voice was calm. "I hope it was worth it." The screen cut to static. Outside, the dreadnought split apart, its burning remains drifting into the void. The Overlord's regret came too late. He had underestimated humanity, and it had cost him everything. Carter exhaled slowly, his fingers relaxing on the controls. It was over. The bridge doors opened, and a Marine stepped in. "Sir, the Xalzor forces are surrendering. What are your orders?" Carter looked at the battlefield, at the wreckage of the once mighty alien fleet. His mind replayed everything. His capture, the torture, the arrogance of his captors. And now the Xalzor knelt before the very species they had tried to exterminate. He stood. "Tell them." He glanced at the burning wreckage of the Overlord's flagship. Humanity forgives nothing. The battlefield had gone silent. Where once the Xalzor Armada had reigned supreme, now only burning wreckage drifted in the void. The Overlord was dead. His fleet was in ruins. Those who remained had surrendered or fled, abandoning their once mighty empire to the ashes of defeat. On the stolen flagship, Carter stood at the bridge, staring out into the stars. The war had raged for years, humanity forced to fight against an enemy that had never considered them a threat. Now, that enemy was shattered. A transmission came through. "Sir, the remaining Xalzor warlords are demanding terms of surrender." Carter turned, his face unreadable. "Tell them to wait." He had one final thing to do first. He walked toward the main console, where the ship's galactic broadcast system lay dormant. This was no ordinary channel. It was the Overlord's personal network, used to send commands across the Empire. Now it belonged to humanity. He activated it. Across the stars, on every Xalzor-held world, the screens flickered to life. The soldiers in their trenches, the officers in their war rooms, the citizens who had cheered for war. All of them suddenly found themselves looking at the face of the enemy they had mocked. They saw Carter. The bridge behind him was filled with human soldiers, standing among the wreckage of what had once been the most powerful ship in the galaxy. Smoke still curled from damaged panels. The Xalzor banners had been torn down, replaced by the insignia of Earth. Carter took a deep breath. Then he spoke. "This is Captain Carter of the United Earth Forces. To every species watching, hear these words and understand them well." His voice was calm, steady, yet filled with a quiet, unshakable power. "The Xalzor Empire called us weak. They invaded our worlds. They burned our cities. They enslaved our people. They thought humanity would kneel. He leaned forward, his gaze unforgiving. But we did not kneel. We did not break. We did not fall. On Salzor colonies, the alien citizens watched in stunned silence. Their leaders had promised them an easy victory, but now their overlord was dead. His fleet was destroyed, and the one standing at the top was human. Carter continued, "We did not start this war. We never asked for it, but we finished it. And now, to those who still wish to challenge us, to those who still see humanity as prey." His eyes hardened. "Remember what happened here today." A moment of silence stretched across the galaxy. The weight of his words sank into every mind. Carter let them linger before he spoke again. "Humanity does not seek conquest. We do not seek war. But if you come for us, if you threaten our home, our people, then know this." He stepped closer to the screen. "We will fight, and we will win." The message cut out. For a long time, the galaxy stood in stunned silence. Then the whispers began. Across countless worlds, rulers, generals, and warlords all came to the same realization. The humans had not just survived. They had become something far more dangerous. The Salzor Empire had learned this lesson too late. And now, the rest of the galaxy would never forget.